We are on to the final phase of the tissue response to injury, and that is our maturation, or sometimes called the remodeling phase. So just to review, we went through the inflammatory process and how that is really the stopgap, trying to make sure no more damage happens, clean up the area, get all the cells that need to be there to start rebuilding. Then we went through the proliferation or fibroblastic repair phase, and that was when we actually start to build collagen in the area. Remember that we're mainly type 3 collagen at that point. And now we're to the point that we have a very solid scar. It's strong, but it's not efficient. And so now we're going to try to change that scar tissue into as close to the original tissue as possible. So this is really a long-term process, okay? Again, we have a fairly strong scar, 4 to 6 weeks fibroblastic repair. We're at that point that the individual probably still notices that things aren't maybe 100% of where they were, but they're feeling solid. We're really been working with the individual, and the area is, while still at danger for re-injury, because you can always have re-injury, it's fairly stable strength-wise. The biggest issue is that that tissue is not functioning like normal tissue. So we need to realign or kind of remodel those collagen fibers. We want the scar, if you could see a visible scar, think about like your skin and a wound. The scar during this phase would start to become smaller, it would start to look more pale, and it would be stronger. So during this phase, we have that decrease in the type 3 collagen and an increase in type 2. So the collagen is actually changing type. And as this happens, we see a steady increase in the tensile strength of the scar. Now remember, I was saying the scar was strong, but remember we talked about if the dam was breaking, we would literally just throw cement, throw whatever we can up there, get as much of it as possible on place, and then eventually rebuild. What this means, the steady increase in tensile strength of the scar, is that the scar is now becoming strong in the way that the body needs it to be. So it's starting to respond to the demands put upon it. So our SAID principle, specific adaptation to impose demands, the SAID principle. And so as the body starts to now use this injured body part, as the person starts to use it, the tissue can now see, okay, we're going to mainly be pulled in this direction. So we're going to realign these fibers so that we're strong in that direction. During this time, as we change from type 3 to type 1, we're no longer building. Okay, this isn't that cellular metabolism activity that we've had through the inflammatory response and through the fibroblastic repair. We're now at the point that we're normalizing. And so we actually see a decrease in the capillaries in the scar. That's why that scar, if we could see it, would look more pale, because we don't need all that blood flow anymore. So all those little capillaries that grew, the arcades that formed, those start to dissolve, and we go back to normal blood flow. Remember in a previous video I talked about using diagnostic ultrasound and how if we put the Doppler effect on an injured tissue, we can really see that increased blood flow. During this phase is when we'd start to see that normalizing and looking like the other, the unaffected part of the body. So again, like I said, as the stress and strain to the scar increase, the collagen realigns for that maximum efficiency. So as that tissue now gets stressed in how it's going to be on a day-to-day basis, the scar can adapt to that, and the collagen will realign to that. And so it'll begin to appear and kind of function normally. And this can start anywhere from about 3 weeks. So remember continuum, the fibroblastic repair phase doesn't have to be completely over for the maturation phase to begin. So maybe approximately about 3 weeks, but it can take up to several years for it to get to as close as it's going to be. So we see this actually pretty anecdotally, and research actually specifies it, that individuals with a torn ACL, when do we usually send those individuals back? 4 to 6 months, right? You guys have done knee evaluation and treatment. 4 to 6 months is usually when the person can is starting, they're running and they're probably back to participation. 6 months is our ideal if we can give that. individuals say they go back. They maybe are in a brace or not in a brace, depending on the doctor's preference. But it really takes them usually about 2 years. I distinctly remember working with a basketball player when I was in grad school, and he had torn his ACL before I got there. And so we still were doing work. He was fully cleared. He'd been playing. And all of a sudden he turned to me one day after practice. He's like, Mary, my knee feels normal. And I go, well, that's kind of a weird thing to tell me. Like, people usually come up to me and say my knee does not feel normal. Something's wrong. And he's like, no, like, I don't feel any difference. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I was young. I was only in grad school. I had just graduated, and this was my first year in grad school. And he's like, I've always felt that something was just a little different in that knee. I felt strong. I knew it was going to be fine, but something was a little different. And now it felt normal today. And having now spent more time with teaching this, like, that totally makes sense. That collagen was still realigned, especially in a graft like an ACL, where we have taken one type of tissue. We have taken a tendon, the patellar tendon or the hamstring tendon, and we have turned it, or if they did an allograft, if they did a cadaver ligament, someone else's tissue entirely, and the body has to turn that into a ligament. And that takes a remarkable amount of time. It's amazing that it happens at all. And it's so cool. But we push things. And again, 6 months, yes, that's solid. But it's not to the point that that tissue is 100% normal. And it will never be 100% normal. But it can get close to it, but it takes time. During that phase, the maturation remodeling phase, we're really interested in Wolff's Law. And this becomes our really heavy rehab time. We really want to push that tissue in safe environments, okay, with our knowledge and our expertise. We want to really start to challenge that tissue so that the body can respond, so that that tissue will lay down in normal ways. If we don't push, if someone stays immobile or someone does not, they decide, well, I'm injured anyways, I'm going to miss the whole season anyways, I'm just going to take it easy and I'll start reconditioning next year, next preseason. If they do that, that tissue will not start and will not remodel in the phase in the way we need it to. And so we still need to spend that time and really focus on what directions does this tissue need to be strong in. We need to think of non-weight bearing as well as weight bearing situations. We need to think about starting to impose strength and resistance to that tissue. So when we talked about our number one modality, and you should have taken that quiz already, right? Exercise, number one modality, okay? This is how it goes hand in hand. We've been using modalities up to this point to help create this environment, to allow this healing to happen. But exercise is always going to be the number one modality because that is the only thing that gets us to this point. Only exercise and specific adaptation to impose demands is going to get us to the point that that tissue is normal.